Some books make the cut, and some get slashed. This isn't just any other TBR game. It's a horror-inspired game show. Welcome to The Final Shelf. Who will survive the season? Hi, I'm Brit. Welcome back to my channel. For years, being a military spouse meant that most of my reading was done digitally via ebooks or audiobooks, and every now and then a trip to the library to actually get a physical book in my hand. And so even though I've always been a big fan of books and of reading, and it's always been my favorite pastime, it just didn't make sense for us to have a big book collection, seeing as we were always on the move and it would risk losing books, damaging books, and honestly just the hassle of packing them up every few months only to unload them, put them on bookshelves, and then have to do it all over again. So it just didn't make sense for me. But I've always dreamed of actually having a big book collection. Not just any book collection though, one that was a true reflection of me, of Brit. So 1 year ago when my husband got out of the Navy, I was able to finally start buying books and starting my own little collection that you'll see back there. I've gotten these a few different ways, some through thrifting, some through online shopping, and a few subscription boxes here and there as well. So I've been slowly curating them and also slowly chipping away at them. But I knew that it's now time to take things to the next level. So I went back to IKEA and got a couple more of my favorite blue bookshelves that you'll see back here and set them up here in my reading room. That left me with the 2 bookshelves that I've been working with, one other one for some wiggle room so that I have space to add more to my collection, and also one that is going to be my final shelf. So here is how the game works. First off, only physical books are going to count for this game. I create my TBRs by season, so I'll have a spring TBR, a summer TBR, a fall TBR, and a winter TBR, and so on. And so every seasonal TBR that I create, I'm going to pull 5 pieces of paper from my TBR jar that reflect my physical library here that I have collected. And these 5 strips of paper are going to be our contestants. Basically, these books are going to have to fight their way through the trials. I will be reading them one by one, putting them up against my rating scale to see where they land, and only those who reach the survival threshold are going to be able to make it to the final shelf. And if not, it gets slashed. This series is going to keep going episode by episode and season by season until one full shelf on my final shelf bookcase gets filled up. And that will mark the end of season 1. So if all goes well, that means that we will potentially have 4 full seasons of the final shelf. So let's talk about how the scoring works. I've taken my basic rating scale that I usually follow when I am rating and reviewing books, tweaked it just slightly to fit the theme here of our horror-inspired TBR game, but basically, each book can earn up to 25 total points in the rating scale. And in order to pass and make it onto the final shelf, the book has to earn at least 13 points out of the 25. That comes out to be around a 3.5 star rating for the book. So anything under 3.5 stars doesn't make it and it gets slashed. But if it does get 13 points or more, then it can claim its place on the final shelf. Now, how do these books actually get their points? Let me break it down for you so that you understand the system as we go along. So there's going to be 5 rating categories. The first category is the hook. Basically, did the concept and the opening actually grab my attention? Was I initially interested? Did I get sucked in really quickly? The second category is the gore factor. So that's my name for the actual writing itself, the prose, the pacing, the structure, the execution, all of those good gory details. Then we have category 3, which is the cast. The characters and relationships are really the core of this. So did the characters fall flat? Is there characters that actually stick out in my brain? Did I like the dynamics of them? Am I going to remember them forever? Then we have Category 4, which is the atmosphere. Did it deliver the vibes that I was looking for? Did I feel fully immersed into the story? Did it give me that, that special something, that mood that I was looking for? And the final category here, I'm calling the kill count. Basically, this is the emotional and intellectual impact of the particular book. Did it haunt me? Did it make me think or feel things? Is this going to be something that I am going to think back on and remember forever, basically living rent-free inside of my brain? And finally, I will be able to award 1 bonus point per episode of the final shelf to any particular book that I think deserves it for some reason outside of the scoring scale. So maybe it's a particularly beautiful edition, maybe it had a really killer plot twist or something like that. But these are rare and I can only do it once per episode. So that's the system. Every book that I have basically accumulated and will accumulate in the future, meaning every book that I buy and add to my shelves, are going to be entered into this contest, rated against the system, and decide whether it gets to live on my final shelf as a book that I feel truly reflects me and my tastes, or gets slashed, meaning that it's going to be unhauled. So let's talk about episodes and seasons. So as I mentioned, there's going to be an episode every calendar season. So because I do a fall TBR, there will be a fall edition of the final shelf, and that will be 1 episode following that season. And then, because we're theming this kind of after like a horror game show type thing, the episodes will all accumulate into seasons themselves, like seasons of a TV show. And once we have a full shelf filled up on our final shelf, that is where the ending of season 1 will be. And then the next episode going forward will start episode 1 of season 2, meaning the next shelf has been started on. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to be extremely clear here so that there's not any confusion on how this is going to work, okay? But once we complete a shelf and the season has ended, then I'm going to have a special edition episode that I'm calling the Shelf Ceremony. And during this shelf ceremony, I'm going to be actually hosting an award ceremony. This is a fun little extra where I'm going to reflect back on the books that I read throughout that entire season of episodes and give out some really fun awards. This is my TBR jar. Every single contender that enters the game, every book that I buy, every book that is on my shelf that is currently unread is going to be added into this jar. During my TBR process, I'm going to be pulling from this jar randomly 5 different books that are going to be my contenders for the seasonal episode going forward. But the jar also has rules of its own because not only does every book go in, but there are some guidelines that the books come out have to follow. So first off, if I hard DNF a book, that means that it gets cut immediately. It's slashed, it's gone into the unhaul pile. If I soft DNF a book, so what I mean by this is sometimes, because I am a little bit of a mood reader, sometimes I'll start a book and it's not that it's bad, it's not that I don't think I'm going to like it if I was in the right headspace for it. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood to read it and I would prefer to move on. So sometimes I'll put a book down. That way I call it a soft DNF that I can come back to later and pick up when I feel like I'm better prepared to read that specific book. So if I do a soft DNF of a book that I pulled from the jar, it gets 1 more chance to go back into the jar and be pulled again. But if I do pull it again in a later episode and I still don't read it, then it's cut, it's slashed, and it goes to the TBR jar. The other rule that my contestants have to follow is if I do not read a book that I draw from the jar during the given season. So if I pull it from my fall TBR and then do not actually read it during the fall and it's still unread when it comes time to do my next TBR pull, then it gets 2 more slips back in the jar. This may be because I just didn't get to it. It may be because I was putting it off for some reason. It may be that I got really busy in life and couldn't fit it in, whatever the case may be. If it doesn't get read, it goes back into the jar, but only this time with 2 slips of paper. That means that it's increasing its likelihood to be redrawn in the future and contend again. So to make things a little bit more fun, I'm going to color code the slips of paper that go inside of the jar. Blue is going to be sci-fi or historical. A weird mix, I know, but in my mind, I was just kind of thinking of like other times, other worlds. Okay, it works. Then we have mint, which is going to be fantasy books. Yellow is going to be either contemporary or literary books. Peach will be thriller or mystery. Romance will be pink. And of course, we have horror books, which are going to be purple. And all of them will be inside of the jar together and will have an opportunity to be pulled while I'm not looking and pulling a slip from the jar. Now that you know the rules of the game, let's meet our contestants. So as I mentioned, over the past year or so, I've been really building my library a little bit at a time. And that means that basically every book that I own is a potential contestant for the final shelf. I also mentioned that I have been slowly chipping away at these, so there are a few that are on my shelves already that I am going to put up against my rating system and see if they will make it onto the final shelf. So that means that at the end of this episode, we're not starting from zero, because some of the books that I've already read this year, at the time of filming this right now, it's August. So from August previously may or may not end up on the final shelf. So let's briefly go through them. Let's start with the books that I have not read first. We're going to jump into the horror ones first. The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, Ghost Ship by S.A. Barnes, When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy, House of Beth by Carrie Cullen, The Queen by Nick Cutter, Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and The Only Good Idians from Stephen Graham Jones. Also, My Heart is a Chainsaw from Stephen Graham Jones. Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison, American Rapture by C.J. Lead, Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman, The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, also The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna Van Veen, Sundial by Catriona Ward, Lucy Undying by Kirsten White, The Road by Cormac McCarthy, The Descent by Jeff Long, The Ruins by Scott Smith, How to Sell a Haunted House and My Best Friend's Exorcism from Grady Hendrix, Whalefall from Daniel Kraus, The Grip of It by Jack Jemk, not sure I'm pronouncing that right, The Reformatory by Tanarive Dew, Funny by Mona Awad, The Replacement by Brenna Jovanoff, Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell, The First Horror by R.L. Stein, Bless Your Heart by Lindy Ryan, Wilder Girls by Rory Power. Moving on into sci-fi, we have Overgrowth by Mara Grant, The Memory Collectors by Deet Meserve, Tenlo by Stark Holborn, Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reed, The Glass Arrow by Kristen Simmons, Death of the Author by Nadie Okorafor. Not sure I'm pronouncing that one correctly either. The Strange Case of Jane O by Karen Thompson Walker, and All Systems Red by Martha Wells. Moving on into mystery or thriller, we have What Kind of Paradise by Janelle Brown, Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero, Cross My Heart by Megan Collins, The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, The Missing Years by Lexi Elliott, The Guest List and The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, The Good Girl by Mary Kubica, A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, Famous Last Words by Jillian McAllister, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, You Are Fatally Invited by Andy Pligo, The Compound by Ashlyn Rawl, Pretty Little Liars by Sarah Shepard, and Forget Me Not by Stacey Willingham. Going into fantasy, I have the entire Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I don't have the dust jacket for this one, but it is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. I also have the Tainted Cup by him, but I am going to include that in the next section because I've already read it. Into the Nightwood by Dale Bailey. Children of Blood and Bone by Tommy Adeyemi. An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. This Princess Kills Monsters by Rye Herman. The Society of S by Susan Herman with all these ugly stickers on the cover. The Wren in the Holly Library by K.A. Lind. A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, A Forbidden Alchemy by Stacey McEwen, I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me by Jameson Shea, Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen, The Last Werewolf by Glenn Duncan, Five Broken Blades by May Corland, The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller, The Coven by Harper L. Woods, Sweet Nightmare by Tracy Wolfe, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, Book of Night by Holly Black, Shadow and Bone by Lee Bardugo, The Black Griffin by Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon, A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen, Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, Throne of Glass, and Book 2 in the series, The Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. I actually began to read this one years and years and years ago, but never finished, so giving it a second chance here. Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill, and When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. Next, we have what I'm calling my bits and ends here, which are books from genres that I don't read a lot of, and maybe were just ones that caught my eye for one reason or another, and I just picked up on a whim. So we have Britney Spears' The Woman in Me, it's a memoir. Love in the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson. Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. These Summer Storms by Sarah McLean, and Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. So that's all the books that I have bought that are currently unread. Next, we are going to go over the books that I've purchased over the year, but that I have read. I have not unhauled any of them, so I have them all here, and we're actually going to go through the rating process with these. I'm going to give my quick review of them. I'm going to give it its rating, and we'll also ultimately decide whether the book is a place on the final shelf or if it's getting slashed. We're going to start with one that's a little different than what I typically read. I usually stick to a few main genres like horror, thriller, fantasy, sci-fi, but every now and then, like I say, something catches my eye and I'll give it a chance. I'm not against trying new things and pushing a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and that's what happened with this first read, which was The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Allie Carter. So this book is a contemporary romance with a little bit of thriller aspect to it, which is really what drew my eye to it. But let me tell you why I ultimately decided to get this one and to pick it up and read it. So I signed up for Book of the Month in December of last year, and I was looking at their assortments, and this was the only one that really caught my eye, and so I was like, okay, I'll just make this my book of the month. So it came in and it sat for about a month, and then in January I caught the flu and I was very sick and I was in bed and I just wanted something to read. I again mostly was reading before this past year on my Kindle, and so I just wanted a book in my hands that gave me wintry vibes. And this book right here was the only wintry book that I had on me. So I picked it up and I was like, well, nothing better to do. And surprisingly, it surprised me. I actually ended up enjoying this one. So this one is about two authors who basically get invited to a really famous author's mansion for Christmas. And of course, it's a contemporary romance, so there's going to be romance going on, but also there is that thriller aspect where the author that they go and spend the mansion at for Christmas disappears. And so basically these two are gearing up to find her or find out what happened to her, and it kind of goes from there. So when it comes to rating this book, for the hook, I gave it a 5 out of 5 because it was the only thing that I had that I fit that need for Christmassy vibes, and when I picked it up and read the first chapter, it was enough of a hook to make me not want to put it down, because if it was anything other than intriguing, being something that's super out of my comfort zone, I would have just put it down and chose something else. For writing, I gave a 4 out of 5. For characters, I gave a 5 out of 5. I actually really enjoyed the character dynamic between the two main characters, and I specifically related to the main character, the female main character, and a lot of her history and what she was feeling and the things she was going through. So 5 out of 5 there. The atmosphere was great. I gave it a 5 out of 5. And for impact, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it was that perfect blend of something that I was unfamiliar with and wouldn't necessarily reach for, and kind of tropes and themes and moods that I enjoy. And when I read it right in those couple weeks after Christmas and it being winter themed and Christmassy, it really just hit for me. So 4 out of 5 there. That means that The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year got a 23 out of 25 for me, which equals up to about a 4.5 star rating. And so The Wonderful Crime of the Year makes it to the final shelf. The next book that I read in January was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this cover obviously initially got my attention because it's literally gorgeous. So pretty. And also, Gothic is one of my favorite genres. If there is Gothic in the book description, I'm going to read it, literally. So this one is set in Mexico. It's historical. I can't remember the exact time frame. Let's see if it says on the back. Yeah, 1950s Mexico. And this follows the main character, Nomi, whose cousin had married a man and moved to another town with him. However, they stopped hearing from her. And then when they finally do hear from her, it's through a letter that makes absolutely no sense. It's a bunch of gibberish and craziness. And so she is sent by her father to go and check up on her cousin, basically. And when she gets there, her cousin lives in this like creepy Gothic manor. There is a lot of different horror things going on within this story. It was very atmospheric. It was very creepy. This is basically like a Gothic ghost story in a way that deals with themes of female hysteria and of colonialism, and you also get like fungus horror and some other really cool things that I really like inside of my books as well, inside of Mexican Gothic. So when it comes to the ratings, I gave The Hook a 5 out of 5. The writing, as I said, was extremely atmospheric. It was really engaging and vivid, and even though there was a sort of slow burn of getting into what the actual plot was going to be, I never found myself bored, which I tend to when there's like a slow burn plot or a slow burn, like if it's romance, like a relationship or things like that, which often I can find myself becoming very bored very easily. So it was engaging enough, atmospheric enough to keep me hooked. And so the writing got a 5 out of 5 from me. I also enjoyed the characters. So not only did I really enjoy Nomi's perspective coming from her, but there's also another character in the story, one of the other males that live inside of this Gothic manor that her cousin is living in, that I really, really enjoyed. And I enjoyed that he was not your typical like male stereotype. So this has a little bit of a romance line, very, very loose romance, but it's there. And I enjoyed the fact that the male character, the love interest, was not like your typical love interest that you'll find in books where he's like tough and like super handsome and all of these things. This character was described as being like a regular person with kind of slightly odd interests, being a little awkward, a little shy, and I really liked reading about that. So the characters were 5 out of 5 for me. Of course, the atmosphere got 5 out of 5. Super creepy, super disgusting in some ways. It was historical. There is those claustrophobic feelings that you can get in certain types of stories, and it just was a 5 out of 5. And for impact, I gave it a 5 out of 5 because the ending line, like when I finished the last chapter, I was like, yes, I loved it so much. I really, really did love the ending of this one. I liked how the author wrapped everything up, and it's still been, like this year, one of my absolute favorite reads, and that leaves Mexican Gothic with a 25 out of 25 points, meaning that it was 5 stars, and it's definitely going to be one that I think back on often. So the verdict here is that Mexican Gothic gets shelved. The next book that I read in February was called House of Hollow. I'm going to put the thumbnail here up on the screen. I still do have it, but it is in my teenage daughter's room, and you could not pay me enough to go in there right now and dig through her crap and find it. So House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This is another cover that caught my eye. It's literally gorgeous. And it was being described as kind of fairy tale-esque, kind of folklorish, but with those horror undertones. And I was in from the moment I saw it, from the moment I read the description. This story is about three sisters who disappeared in their childhood for a few days. I can't remember exactly how long. I believe it was like a week or two. And when they came back, they were changed. So they just stumbled back from wherever they had been, naked, dirty, and they started having other various changes like their eye color, their hair color, their behaviors, and things like that, all completely changed. And fast forward in the future, we're following the youngest of the three sisters who had disappeared. Now, all three sisters don't remember where they went or what happened to them when they were gone as children, but they are left with the scars from it. And this story blew up, and so they're all over the news. Of course, as being missing children, and then the strangeness of the way that they returned. And so we're following the youngest one, and her older sister, one of her older sisters, disappears again. And it mirrors the way in which they all three disappeared as children. And so it's basically following the younger sister as she's trying to find her older sister. And of course, as that happens, some horrific things start going on around them. They seem to be being stalked by some strange man that neither one of them recognizes or knows. And it just kind of goes from there with the two remaining younger sisters looking for their oldest sister, trying to figure out what happened to her. This book, like I said, was described as being kind of like a modern dark fairy tale, and I literally loved this book from page 1 to the last page. Like, it was definitely all of those things that it was described as, but it was also kind of fever dream-esque. Like, there was a lot of eeriness and strangeness going on within the story, and I was really, really immersed. I loved this book. Crystal Sutherland's writing was very lush, very descriptive. It really leaned into those kind of eerie, dark fairy tale vibes, and it was really, really good. But despite that, and despite how beautiful the writing was, it was really dark. There was some really gruesome things going on inside of the books. The girls experienced some really disgusting body horror type things. There was bugs and plant horror. And so there was that feeling of beauty, but also like rot. And I really, really dug it. So for the rating, House of Hollow got a 5 for me when it came to the hook, a 5 for me when it came to the writing, a 4 for me when it came to the character development, a 5 for atmosphere, and a 4 for impact. This was one of those books that I enjoyed the journey, like from start to finish, but there was just something missing, like right at the very end. Like, I wish there was a little bit more. I couldn't name exactly what it was that I was looking for, but it was just missing something at the end. It just didn't wrap up as well as I would like it to, but I still wholeheartedly love this book, super recommend it. And that leaves House of Hollow with 23 out of 25 points, which is a 5-star read. And then in April, I read The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I have actually previously, so I'm not counting it because it was a few years ago and one of the only books that I've held on to since then. I previously read The Final Girl Support Group. So this one was a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like the best read ever. But then I gave him a second chance when it came to A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires because I love books. I love vampires, and also I live in the South, so it sounded perfect for me, and I decided to give it a go, and I am so excited, like so happy that I actually did, because I loved this book. I love this book so much. This book follows Patricia, who is a housewife back in the 80s/early 90s who has 2 children, and she basically just lives that typical stereotypical housewife life of that you kind of think of when you think of like the nuclear family. And she joins a book club with some other ladies in her small town who get together and read spooky books, which I'm a fan of. Like, good choice, right? But then something happens whenever a stranger moves into their town, a strange man. And then weird things start happening, and Patricia seems to be the only one noticing it. And it basically goes from there. This was the book that really made me fall in love with Grady Hendrix, because as I said, I had previously read The Final Girl Support Group. I was excited about that one, like really stoked, and then it was okay. But this one was amazing. So in this one, Grady Hendrix covers... Like, it surprises me how well he writes from a female point of view, and I appreciate the ways in the topics that he actually covers while knowing that he's never experienced that like himself. I was actually looking into it, and he does a lot of interviewing specific types of people and really getting women's opinions before he goes and writes about them in a book, and I really, really love that. This one, he says he actually wrote for his mother, which I love. But he covers a lot of things that women have had to go through historically. So that feeling of power imbalances inside of relationships, and women historically, when we think something's wrong, or, you know, we are reacting in a panicked or undesirable way. It's been often, you know, slapped on the label of a hysterical woman, and not being seen, not being heard, not feeling like you hold any value anywhere. That was covered really heavily in this book, and I really, really enjoyed Patricia's point of view. I, of course, was born in the 90s. So I can't say that I relate 100% to the kinds of things that she's going through, because it was a different time period, but I related to them in the way that a modern woman in 2025 could, and I really liked that he tackled those themes. And then, of course, the vampire was not your typical vampire that you would think of in media, and I really did enjoy this fresh take on vampires. And I literally hated the dude. I hated the dude so much. I think that through this book, Grady Hendrix was kind of making the vampire fit the stereotypical narcissist role of somebody who, like, we would consider to be a narcissist, but like to the extreme. That's what I really felt like for myself reading this, and I may or may not know somebody kind of like that, and it really made me hate this vampire dude so very much. So the ending was quite satisfying, if I do say so myself, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I gave the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires a 5 when it comes to the hook, a 5 when it comes to the writing, a 5 for the characters, 5 points for the atmosphere, and 5 points for the impact. Like I said, literally 5 stars, 25 out of 25 points. Absolutely love this book, absolutely recommend it. If anything that I said or talked about right now rings a bell with you, definitely recommend. Next, I read Starling House by Alex E. Harrow, because again, it caught me by that beautiful cover. So pretty. Look at the colors, okay? I was really excited about this one. It's another one that is described as being kind of gothic, more on the lines of like a gothic contemporary fantasy. It also has to do with an author, which again, I tend to really enjoy. So there's this author that wrote this collection of like fairy tales, dark fairy tales, and kind of in the vein, it reminded me a little bit of like Alice in Wonderland type stories, where a little girl falls into another realm with all these scary creatures and things like that. But it's about this author who wrote these things and built this gothic mansion, and then after they died, random people are coming into this mansion to like care for it. and they all call themselves with the last name Starling, but none of them actually seem to be related. And so the town just doesn't really know what's going on there. Well, our main character has been obsessed with these stories and with this Starling house basically her entire life. And she actually was able to snag a job as a housekeeper for this Gothic manor. And so by doing that, it introduces her to the current inhabitant of Starling House, its current caretaker, and also some of the strange things that go on within Starling House. It sounded like just the kind of thing that I would like and that I would enjoy, but it fell a little flat in some areas. So for the hook, I rated this a 4 out of 5. Again, it started out really interesting. The first chapter or so was really, really strong, and I thought this was going to be something that I was just going to love. But that momentum did not hold going forward. Like, it started to kind of decline as it started getting towards the middle of the book. I gave the writing a 4 out of 5. Again, it had that kind of Gothic fairy tale-esque-ness to it that I do really like to read. Just unfortunately, I gave the characters 3 out of 5. I didn't hate the main character in any means. She was a little frustrating to read from her point of view, but what I did dislike is the random romance from like out of nowhere that the author decided to just throw into this story for no good reason at all. And I didn't like that at all. So the caretaker of the house is this man named Arthur, and this house cleaner, which I can't remember her name right now. What is her name? Opal, that's what her name is, Opal. Opal is coming to clean this house where Arthur lives. He's grumbly and grumpy, and they have literally nothing in common, and there's literally no mentions of either one being attracted to the other one until randomly they're kissing, and that's just not my cup of tea. So 3 out of 5 for character development. And the atmosphere was also 3 out of 5 for me. So like I said, I really, really loved the beginning. It was dark, it was mysterious, it was a little bit spooky. And then like right after the first couple of chapters, it just kind of plummeted for me. And it didn't pick back up until more towards the end of the book. I think what it was that made me not enjoy the middle of the book was that the author did a lot of like info dumping. It felt random in some reasons. Like I was like, why do I need to know this? Why are you telling me this? And it wasn't just info dumping in like the regular way. It was also like full articles of like the town's history and random people who lived in it, and I just wasn't loving it. I was extremely bored in the middle. I almost put this book down and DNF'd like 4 times, but I held out and I got to the end. I maybe shouldn't have because I didn't end up loving it, and I ended up giving the impact rating a 2 out of 5. The ending was satisfying in a way, but like a little bit confusing. I didn't quite understand like what the author meant by certain things. It was just confusing to me. So that leaves Starling House with 16 out of 25 points, which means that this book fails to meet our 17-point limit, and we have our first slashed book. All right, moving on. The next book that I read was The Unworthy by Augustina Batsarika. Not sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this book is a dystopian horror novel, which is following a woman who is inside of a religious cult, which is called the Sacred Sisterhood. And this is based in like a future of our world where like climate change has like ravished the land. A lot of the animals have died off. A lot of the humans have died off, and the humans that are left are kind of left doing savagery, right? It's all fending for yourself. There's not really any civilization to speak of from my understanding going on. And our main character has kind of found solace within the walls of this kind of convent cult place that truly has some horrific things going on inside of it. But in her eyes, it's better than being like out in the real world where like food is hard to come by, the water is poisonous. So this book had a lot of things going for it when I came across it. Number one, I absolutely love religious horror. It's one of my favorite like themes and subgenres within horror. And I also really enjoyed dystopia, but also this book is written like in the form of journal diary entries. So you're not actually reading like the narrative of what's currently happening. You're reading all of this and like through the main character's notes. And so you are really seeing things strictly from her point of view. So it feels really personal. And that being said, with the level of how personal this feels, you begin to grow very attached to her, and especially learning some of the things like that she's gone through and is going through within this convent that she's living in. This was a really good read for me. It's pretty short, as you can see, and I read it very quickly. Because I just didn't want to put it down. Like it had me really hooked. It's absolutely horrific in some ways. I will say trigger warning for depictions of sexual assault in here. There's torture, there's abuse, there's animal death, there's some really heavy themes going on inside of this book. I do know that the author has like another book out that's also really dark. I just have not read it yet. I believe it's called Tender as the Flesh. So this is the first that I've read from her. But I'm definitely a fan. I really enjoyed the experience. It's kind of weird when you say like, yeah, this was absolutely horrific. There's torture and all these bad things, but I loved it. But really I did enjoy the experience, not because those things are of course like lovely to read about, but because a lot of the messages going on in the background and the things that it makes you think about and the ways that it makes you feel, it was a really emotional experience for me. So yeah, very horrific book, but I did truly love it. This book also featured a sapphic relationship between our main character and one of the other women inside of the Sacred Sisterhood, so bonus points for that. So when it comes to rating The Unworthy, I gave the hook 5 points, I gave the writing 4 points, the characters 4 points, the atmosphere 5 points, and the impact 5 points. So that leaves The Unworthy with 23 out of 25 points, meaning that she is being shelved. Next, I read The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is kind of like a sci-fi dystopian mixed with some fantasy elements, but it features a magic system that is based on what they call clairvoyance. So it's like the ability to see or hear or interact with like ghosts and the spectral realm in some kind of way, and I found that to be really interesting. It was a little bit difficult, like just jumping in, because I had no idea what the heck was going on. And I think that's a common feeling with a lot of people who actually read this story, because they have like, in the beginning, the author writes like, you can see she's got like a guide here to help you pick up on what all the different kinds of clairvoyance are and like what they can do. But even with that and the glossary that they have at the end, like with everybody's name and vocabulary words, it was still a little bit difficult for me to get into like fully immerse myself, because I felt like every page or so I was like, what is this word? What does this mean? I don't know what this is. So basically in this world, being a clairvoyant is illegal, and if you're found out being a clairvoyant, they will basically arrest you and take you to the specific place of their world that is basically like a prison. And our main character, no surprise here, gets found out to be a clairvoyant and is sent to this place where they imprison clairvoyance. However, when she gets there, she realizes that not everything is as it seems, and not everything is as she's been told and as they are told by like their government. Basically, she learns that there are actually another like alien race behind everything and pulling the strings of running this this basically prison camp for clairvoyance. And we follow our main character as she is like assigned one of these alien beings as her like owner, and she basically becomes his servant, and it goes from there. The world building on this one was really, really good. Again, despite feeling like I was just thrown in there and left kind of having to figure out what was going on. It was really interesting world building. The magic system was really interesting. I really liked the idea of like the ghosts and the poltergeists and different people having different types of clairvoyant powers or magic that allowed them to interact with this spirit realm in various ways. It was all really, really interesting. Paige, the main character, basically starts off immediately getting the action going, and I found that really helpful. You don't have a lot of time spent in the beginning like establishing that world building. That can often feel kind of like info dumping, so we got right into the action, which was really good. However, this is another one of those stories within the fantasy and sci-fi realm where I feel like they shove romance in just to do it, and I didn't feel it at all. I didn't feel the chemistry between these two characters. I didn't understand why a human woman in that situation would even allow herself to catch feelings for a man who basically, well, an alien man who basically like owns her, and it was like romanticized. So that gave me kind of the ick. To be fair, he wasn't the worst of the aliens there in this prison compound, so there's that. But yeah, I didn't see it, I didn't feel it, but it happened again. I will say that it's quite a chunky paperback, like it's a pretty thick book, but I felt like not a lot happened, like right until the very end. It felt like there was enough to fill the chapters, and of course you're learning a lot like about the world, but I literally was like, what is happening? What is going on? Why are we here? What is the goal? You know, it was like one of those books. And so it kind of lost me there in that aspect. But then of course there was more action packed in towards the end of the book. Enough to leave a kind of satisfying ending. Just, I would say that this one wasn't like a big favorite of mine, but I did enjoy the journey. The main thing is that the world building and the magic system specifically is what has my interest here. Like that is kind of what saved this story for me, because I want to keep reading the series just to learn more about that, if that makes sense. So let's talk about the ratings. I gave the hook of this story a 5 out of 5. I gave the writing a 4 out of 5, characters 3 out of 5, atmosphere 5 out of 5, and impact 4 out of 5. So that leaves my final score being 21 out of 25 points for the Bone Season, which means that this book gets shelved. And as I mentioned earlier, the final book that I have read this year from my physical TBR is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. And this book was amazing. I literally loved it. This is a high fantasy novel, okay? A high fantasy novel, but it's a mystery, a murder mystery. It's kind of got that Sherlock Holmes and Watson vibe going on, where our main character is an investigator, an assistant to a government investigator who is put on this case to figure out what the heck happened when a military official is murdered in a very strange way. There was a lot that I really enjoyed about this story. The world building is really cool, but not heavy-handed. Besides the mystery going on, you also have this lore going on where the world in which they live, the oceans are filled with these giant beasts called leviathans, and during the wet season, the leviathans will swim up onto shore and will just start wrecking havoc, kind of Godzilla style, and destroying cities and killing people. And so that's something that is going on in the background as this murder happens right before the wet season. And so not only are our main characters trying to figure out this murder mystery, but they're also worrying about the threat of the Leviathans in the background. And so that was a really cool aspect. But what I really, really, really loved about this book was the main character. So we follow Din, which is the main character, and he is the assistant to the government investigator whose name is Anna. And they were a very fun dynamic. Din is very lovable. He's a little bit awkward, a little bit shy. He has a troubled background, and he's basically working a job just in order to send money back to his family. And so that's the only reason that he has found this job and started working for Anna. And Anna is a little different. She is almost always blindfolded. She's kind of erratic, but she's very, very smart, and she has a really good memory, and she's able to figure out intricate mysteries and solve problems to things that the normal person wouldn't be able to do. And so that is why she has the job that she has. But the dynamic between these two characters was really, really great. There was some humor in it, but it wasn't enough. I'm quite a serious person. Like, I like my books to be serious and to cover serious topics. So like humorous books, like heavily handed comedy inside of books doesn't work for me. But this was just like whimsical enough and slightly humorous with these two characters playing off of each other, that I really, really, really enjoyed it. Take that with a grain of salt, because this book was also pretty horrendous. It has body horror, it has murder, it's got plant horror, it's got like missing persons, and those terrifying Leviathan monsters, which the descriptions given of those things are nightmare fuel. I loved it. I love the story. It's definitely right along with Mexican Gothic, like one of my favorite reads in the past few years, definitely one of my favorite reads this year. And so this book got 5 out of 5 on all tiers. Absolutely love this book. So 25 out of 25 points for The Tainted Cup, which means that it is getting shelved. All right, that is all of the books from my physical TBR that I have read this year. And so that leaves us with these books staying. You turn them around so you can see, okay? These are the books that are staying and joining our very first shelf on our final shelf bookcase. This is the only one that did not make the cut. So I have had pretty good luck with my reading so far when it comes to physical copies. So let's take a look at how our final shelf is starting off. After everything I've read so far, here is the current state of the shelf. Okay, so here are at the end of this episode. We have our first survivors of the trials. We have our jar full with potential contestants, and the games are about to begin. In my next TBR video, I will be pulling the very first official contestants from my TBR jar, so be sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you are notified whenever that posts and you can see who is going to be battling it out first. Let me know which book that we have talked about today has final girl energy for you, and if you have nothing else to say, drop a knife emoji down in the comments below just to let me know that you were here. See you next time.